All right. Alei Shur Chelek Aleph. It's the 17th of April, Iyar Hei Tavshin Ein Gimel. Starting from the introduction on Daf Zayin. Alei Shur quotes the pasuk, Ben Puras Yosef, Ben Puras Alei Ayin, Banois Tzada Alei Shur. Pasuk that Yaakov utters with respect to his son Yosef in Parshas Vayechi, and Rashi there explains Alei Shur al HaChoyma, upon the wall. So it also begins, Mechitza Ava Mavdeles ben Olam HaTorah leven ha'olam Hashem b'chutz. There's a thick partition, a thick wall that separates the Olam HaTorah and the world outside. Ha'imed b'chutz, a person is outside this world. Afi mushomer Torah mitzvos, not only if he's not observant, but even if he is observant. He doesn't have any concept, any idea of the wonder that is generated inside the Torah world. Ve'yesh, sometimes it's even worse, that even a person sitting within the walls of Beis HaMidrash, he's missing the reasoning, he's missing the depth. He's still standing outside when he hasn't had the opportunity to associate closely with Talmidei Chachamim. This last part of the sentence is a paraphrase of a Gemara in Brachos Daf Mem Zayin Amud Beis. The Gemara that discusses the definition of an Am Haaretz, and Rashi there comments about Shimush Talmidei Chachamim and this concept of Tam. The author is paraphrasing that. In this generation, the number of Lomdei Torah is increasing, Baruch Hashem, and he wrote this many years ago. It's certainly true in our days. Unfortunately, there are very few out of these numerous Talmidim who have the opportunity to have any sort of intimate contact with Talmidei Chachamim. Very few are the teachers who are like Malach Hashem Tzvakos. Now this is from a pasuk in Malachi Perek Beis Pasuk Zayin, and the Gemara quotes it and comments on it in Chagigat Daf Tesvav Amud Beis, that if the Rav resembles a Malach Hashem Tzvakos, then you should seek Torah from his mouth. So he's paraphrasing those words, and he says there are very few in our generation such high caliber Talmidei Chachamim who are like Malach Hashem Tzvakos that you can seek Torah from them. They and the Talmidim were killed. There are only a few remnants. They have the aspect of She'arei Knesses Agdola, is of course paraphrasing the Mishnah, Pirkei Avos, Perek Aleph Mishnah Beis, that Shimon HaTzadik Haya Mishi'arei. I don't think the author intends here this phrase as a mere figure of speech. He means that those Talmidei Chachamim who survived the war have the same function as She'arei Knesses Agdola after the Galus of Bavel. It's the same type of situation. Uvnei HaTorah asher b'dorenu koi hisraglu belimud Torah bli shimush Talmidei Chachamim. The Bnei Torah who in our generation are so used to learning Torah without constant and intimate contact with Talmidei Chachamim. The learning is book learning. Ad she'ein oile al da'atam klal. It never occurs to them that possibly they're still standing outside of that wall. Despite the great knowledge that they've acquired. It's because, in fact, of the great knowledge they've acquired that it doesn't occur to them that they're still standing outside. What does that mean, they're standing outside? It means they haven't reached inner dimensions of Torah and the inner dimensions of themselves. Some of them don't appreciate at all what's missing. They're not aware of this lack. They also achieve a certain status. They have certain positions. One may become a lamdan. He becomes proficient in learning Gemara. The second becomes extremely punctilious in fulfillment of mitzvahs. A third may choose to become a Haredi activist and act on behalf of the community. Fourth may be drawn to zealousness. Others may sense that Tiras Emes Mehem Va'ala is actually beyond their reach. They may sense that there's something missing. Yekarim ele, these precious souls, mechapsim derech, they're searching for a path. Hem kolotim pisgampo v'anhagasham. They may absorb an aphorism over here or a certain mode of conduct over there that they read about somewhere. Bimkoim hachinuch b'hachikui. And what happens is that instead of chinuch comes mere emulation, mere parroting. Uvimkom hashimush, instead of that close and intimate relationship with a teacher, ha'avana hashitchis mikli shel shiur v'i. What comes is instead superficial understanding from third and fourth hands. This is, of course, a paraphrase of the terminology in Shas of Kli, Yishoin, Sheni, etc. What in fact happens to somebody who truly enters Olam HaTorah? And the author quotes the pasuk in Yoiv, it's Perek Yud Aleph, pasuk Yud Beis, Ayir Pere Adam Yivoled, that the pasuk urges a person who's born like a wild donkey to be reborn as a human being, to become a mensch. That can happen even outside Olam HaTorah, meaning mechanech muvhak, a solid mechanech, solid educator, yuchal lehatzliach lechanech adam, can be mechanech and bring about a mensch. However, ha'adam shezachal yikanes lesech Olam HaTorah be'emes, a person who is not just a mensch, but has merited entering into the Olam HaTorah that you're speaking about, that's something else. He becomes transformed into someone else. This is an internal revolution, transformation. That only occurs within the Beis HaMidrash. Outside, you can have a successful mechanech who will be able to turn a wild donkey into a human being. But to truly transform oneself, that only happens within the walls of Beis HaMidrash. And now the author elaborates on this concept of transformation. What does it mean to be transformed into someone else? He gives 3 examples. A person who becomes a prophet, the Rambam writes, when that spirit of prophecy rests upon him, his soul then mingles at the level of the malachim, who are called ishim. Now he uses this terminology. He becomes transformed. He then is aware he's no longer as he was before. He's gone beyond the level of the wise, the level that's achievable with the human intellect. As it says regarding Shaul, that Shmuel Hanavi told him, "V'hisnabisa imam, you will prophesy with them, v'nehpachta leish acher, and you will be transformed." So this terminology is already rooted in the psukim. You will be transformed into someone else. This is from Perek Zayin of Hilchos Yesodei HaTorah, Halacha Aleph. That's example number 1. U'midarkei teshuvah, the Rambam writes further that one of the elements of teshuvah, to change one's name, as if to say, Ani acher, I'm a different person. I'm no longer the person who did those things. He transforms his actions, he changes them for the good, and to a correct path. This is in Perek Beis of Hilchos Teshuvah, Halacha Dalet. Third example is from Rabbeinu Yonah. When a person hears and absorbs the rebuke of the Chachamim and the Mochechim, those who rebuke, and he hears it and he submits himself to these words, and he allows his heart to accept these words of chastisement. Such a person, in one moment, can emerge from darkness into a great light. When a person listens in that way, and his heart understands, and he accepts the words of rebuke, and he commits himself to do ככל אשר יורו תופסי התורה, in accordance with everything that is taught by the Torah scholars מן היום ההוא ומעלה, from the day onwards וכולי, עשה בידו התשובה. He's achieved תשובה ונהפך לאיש אחר. Again, these critical words. He will be transformed into a different person. This is שערי תשובה, חלק בייס, פרק י'. To summarize, הרי בנבואה, so when it comes to prophecy, בתשובס אדם מעצמו, or when a person is motivated by himself to do tshuva, ובקבלת תיכחס אחרים, and also by accepting chastisement and rebuke from others. Those are the three examples, תפסי התורה. ישנה סגולה זו. These three events have this property שאדם נהפך לאחר, that a person can be transformed into someone else. Next point. איך ובמה הוא נהפך? How does it happen that he becomes transformed? In what way? האם כוחותיו וזכויותיו משתנים? Do we say that his talents change, his personality, his character traits? בגדר שראובן נהפך לשמעון. We're saying that Reuven can become a Shimon. ודאי שזה לא ייתכן. Of course that's not possible. A Reuven will always be a Reuven. אלא, the truth is that גם האיש אחר, that other person that we're speaking about, that he becomes, היה צפון ביסוד עצמו. He was already hidden within the person. He was there. רק שלא ידע ממנו. But the individual didn't know of this deeper level of his personality. To become an אדם אחר means to become aware of it and access those levels. האדם דומה לבניין גדול. A person resembles in a building, בעל קומות רבות, with a number of stories. ובכל קומה ישנן יותר סגולויס מאשר בזה שתחתיהן. Every story, every step has more properties and more depth than the one underneath. והוא, האני שלו, this person, his I, היה דר עד כה בקומס הקרקע. Until now, he lived on the ground floor. ואולי במרתף, maybe even in a cellar, in the basement. And he says in brackets, על זה ידובר בעזרת השם בפנים הספר. We'll discuss this inside. והנה על ידי גילוי ממעורר בקנבה. So through these experiences, either prophecy, or על ידי תשובה, self-motivated תשובה, או על ידי קבלת תיכחה, these are the three examples, by accepting rebuke, יכול אדם זה, we're saying that the process of transformation is that a person can לגלוס בקרבו עומק ורום חדש. He can discover within himself new heights and new depths. שלא ידע מהם עדיין. He was not aware of them until now. ומעתה נהיו המעמקים והרוממות מקום דירתו ברוחניות. And from now on, those newly discovered depths and heights will be his abode in Ruchanius. So he's not becoming a Shimon, whereas before he was a Reuven. He's discovering a new level of Reuven. In more concrete terms, what he starts seeing is a Torah with limitless depth. Oilam amoik v'niflai discovers a world that's deep and wonderful. And he wishes from now on to live his life in depth and height. The key word here, the operative word, he wishes, he desires, he cultivates this ratzoin to live his life differently. As nepach leishachar. That's when we say that he's been transformed into a different person. Hu gila meimad chadash b'kibo. He's discovered new dimension within himself. V'seirasoi ufnimius atzmoi, his Torah and the inner dimensions of his own personality, ba'im ke'achas b'zoch memad, they simultaneously arrive within this dimension. Kamu, as we said on the previous page, Yachoil Adam Lias Lamdan, person can be proficient in Gemara study. Machmir b'mitzvahs, he can be very punctilious in fulfillment of mitzvahs. Askan v'kanai, he can be a public activist, he can be a kanai. Val kulam yachol yosif pashut, and all the more so, for sure, a person can be just a regular, ordinary Jew. And to stand outside. We're talking about a person who may have changed his outlook on the world, behaves differently, and he may even find satisfaction in a life of Torah. But these things have not reached his core. He remains the same person that he was before his involvement in Torah. What does a Torah personality look like when he becomes transformed into someone else? Come with me, my friend the reader. Let's walk on the wall. To gaze at the beauty of this charming person, quoting the commentary of Chazal on the blessing that Yaakov gave to Yosef. Ben Hachen, that's the meaning of Ben Puras according to Rashi, this charming person, whose charm is apparent to those who gaze at him. They can tell this is a true Torah personality, they can see. And we want to look at him. Let's take a look at the different periods of his life, the different forms of his avodah, that are described in this sefer. That's what it is. The words are chosen very carefully over here. We're walking on the wall. At the moment, the person is not required to enter. He's given an opportunity to gaze at the Torah world and to see what this transformation can effect, what it can achieve, the beauty of the life of a Talmid Chacham. Says the author further, Mechaber Sefer Zeh, the author of this book, and of course it was written anonymously, when he was young, a storm wind brought him into the orbit of a giant. Now here the author is paraphrasing a pasuk, Yoshua, Perik Yudalid, pasuk Tezvav. It speaks about how Adam HaGadol Ba'anakim, this giant among men. Admoyer Me'er Einenu Mechayem Eisim Be'ma'amaroi Maran Rabbi Yocham Levi B'Yeshivas Mir HaKadisha. So as a young man he was brought into the orbit of Rabbi Yocham Levi in Mir. Katan Ayav Katan Ishar. The author was small and remained small. ולכלל תלמידיו, גאוני וגדולי ארץ, לא יזכה להיכנס. He never became one of the great תלמידים, the גאונים of Yerucham Halevi. אבל איש אכן הפך דמו. But he too became transformed into someone else. ומבשרוי חזה, he saw of his own flesh. And this is again a paraphrase from Yoiv. It's Perek Yutes, Pasuk Chavav, where the Pasuk that says, מבשרי אחזה אלוהיקה. All this paraphrasing that. He saw on his own flesh, Mahu tal hatchiyah shel tiras adam. He saw this tal tchiyah is a phrase that Chazal used, this dew that resuscitates a person. V'chayei ha'adam ha'gadol lemi shezacha listofef b'tziloi, for somebody who had the merit of being in his shadow. Shanim mispar zacha lir'ois v'lishmo es admor nishmaso Eden. So for a number of years, he had the privilege of hearing and seeing Rabbi Yerucham. Ad Alei Shur until Rabbi Yochanan passed away. This is in approximately 1936. And for a number of further years, he had the privilege of closeness to the great Talmidim of Rabbi Yochanan. Presumably, he means until about 1939. Once again, a storm wind came and cast him in a distant land. He spent the war years in Sweden mostly. From the day until now, he's quoting a paraphrasing pasuk in Tehillim Perek Yud Gimel that says Ad Ana Ashis Eitzes Benafshi. He is from the day on he has sought counsel. Keitzad yuchal achayos letzmo. How can he bring alive for himself as hargashes and alois shel remus, those exalted and noble feelings, hayirah v'asimcha v'yislavus apnimis, the awe, the joy, the inner enthusiasm that he used to have in the company of Rabbi Yerucham and his great Talmidim. He's tried over the years to recapture those. This search, and of course according to the principles that Rabbi Yerucham left in his essays, in accordance with the impoverished understanding of the author, that's what guided the author in approaching his work of describing the Avodah Talmid Chacham in his different periods of life. To detail, to specify everything in this sefer, and to specify it's taken from particular ideas of Rabbi Yerucham. Ef Shaki Rabim, that would be impossible because they're numerous. He's of course quoting over here, he's paraphrasing Seder HaTaras Nedarim. We do it on Erev Rosh Hashanah, and we say Ki Ef Shaki Futam Ki Rabimim, it's impossible to detail them because they're numerous. He's saying the same Lashon over here. Ef Shaki Rabimim is not possible. Much of it, most of it is based on the Yesodos of Rabbi Yerucham. If the reader finds himself being moved from a particular chapter or ma'amar or particular essay, more so than others, he should know he should know that what's reached his ears is a faint echo from the holy words of Rav Yerucham. It's been years that the divine providence has placed the author in a Makom Torah in Eretz Yisrael. Throughout the years when he's been involved with the Rabbim, in matters of chinuch and guidance, the experience of Rav Yerucham, he visualized it in front of his eyes, and he's had the quiet tefillah in his heart. Ki aboicher b'Torah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the one who's bocher b'Torah, yezakeu loses b'lev shema. We're given the privilege of placing in the heart of those who hear me'ein shaviv oisem oir shebaTorah, like a spark of that light in the Torah. Shehu atzmo zechal b'imelav. The author himself experienced in his youth. But at the same time, this is extremely important, at the same time, he has not ignored he hasn't ignored the colossal change that has happened within the walls of Beis HaMidrash, in the hearts of those who learn Torah, in contrast to the pre-war years. He hasn't ignored it. The little bit that the Mechaber himself was Mechadesh in the principles, according to his understanding of the words of Chazal, and over and above that, the order in which he has organized things, that is a consequence of necessity, the change in our generation. In his attempt to bring these words closer to this generation. Those who grow in an environment which is completely different from the period of pre-war Europe. So that was his innovation, the little bit that he added, that he says, beyond the principles laid down by Rav Yerucham, because he could not ignore the dramatic changes in generations. Nidme, he says, it seems to me, those who heard it in the yeshiva orally, will still see something here that's new. They will benefit too. Because the words here combine into a full picture. In the yeshiva, those who heard it may have heard parts, bits and pieces. Here, it's a complete picture, or a derech chayim mesuderes, in an organized way of life. V'hiratzein, may it be Hashem's will. Shekorei hachibur, this is of course what he wishes. The readers, the students of this composition, Hatsuadim Alei Shur, who are being invited to walk upon the wall, when they picture in front of their eyes now, as a result of walking upon the wall, the beauty of a true life of a Talmid Chacham, that they should be inspired, in our terminology, should be awakened to descend from the wall, to start searching for the gate, where they themselves will now enter into the Olam HaTorah. So even though the Sefer is a description, it's walking upon the wall to see the great beauty of the life of a Talmid Chacham. That's not sufficient. We hope that they'll be inspired to actually descend from the wall ultimately and find their own pathway into Olam HaTorah. So that this Sefer should be transformed from a gaze from atop the wall into gates of guidance. Adkan.